Good evening, good people. We are so glad that you're here with us tonight. We're going to get started with our content here in just another minute, but we want you to come in, take your shoes off, get comfortable. We're going to get started here shortly. While we're waiting for our folks to get in here, please feel free to share on socials or text your fam and friends and tell them to join us. We also want to take a moment to give love to our interpretation team. Can y'all drop some love for the interpretation team in the chat with your reactions? You know, this is more than just checking a demographic box for us. This is about making sure that every single one of us has access to learn from and with one another and build the power of our people together. So thank you for making this more possible, interpretation team. I also want to take a moment to shout out On Point, all the tech and design crew, and every single organization and every single one of you who have gotten on this call tonight and made it possible. Good evening, and welcome to this mass call to process elections and our feelings, to be reminded of our work in this time, to learn together. We've been doing so many unscheduled emergency calls to process the intense twists and turns of this election cycle over the last month that it's kind of important to note that this call was actually planned. So thank you all for having it on your calendars and showing up tonight. We always knew that we were going to want to take stock of where we are in this election going into the Democratic National Convention. So thank you again for prioritizing this call tonight. Again, you could take a second right now to holler at your folks real quick and tell them to join us. Tonight is not going to be a mass call that you want them to miss. It also happens that there continues to be a lot of late breaking news. So we're going to be doing multiple things today. We're going to take a deeper look at the DNC and the fact that there are people in our movement moving both inside and outside strategies to influence and build alternatives to that space. And we're going to talk to some of those folks today. We're going to make space to hold that this election and current events have been a lot for many of us, myself included, and it may continue to be that way. We'll reground ourselves in what can be done before we leave this space that we share together tonight. I am Ashley Woodard Henderson. My homies call me Ash. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to be your host for this evening. We're so glad that you've joined us. If you're watching on Zoom, please use the chat to say hello, where you're from. And if you are repping an organization, you can feel free to shout them out too. I also want to shout out to folks that are watching on Twitter and YouTube. We see you. Y'all feel free to do the same. Introduce yourselves to one another. And I'm sending a little bit of special love to folks who are watching the recording after our live tonight. Before we get into our grounding, I just want to do some level setting with you. That one thing we know for sure is that when we fight for justice and liberation, there's always going to be some haters. The more visible that our work is, the more they're going to come after us. It's upsetting for sure, but we're not going to be surprised if there are trolls at this event this afternoon, right? We know for a fact that there might be one or two folks that are here just to seed chaos and confusion. So if you see any hateful messages in the Zoom chat, I want you to flood the chat with solidarity. I want you to flood the chat with other positive messages of love and affirmation to the work that we're going to do together. Talk about the vision that we have. We're going to drown it out and we're going to get back to work and stay focused on the work of our call this evening. We remember that we can disagree on this call. We can share our feelings on this call, but we're going to do that in a manner that is not disrespectful and demeaning to one another. We're going to live into our fullest dignity and be an invitation for others to do so as well. Now, let's take stock of where we are since our last mass call. Among many interventions, we are building a movement that can compete up and down the ballot. So let's start where many people don't look when all eyes turn to the presidential election. We just had primaries in a bunch of states. In most of those places, we had WFP champions on the ballot. And the party and our allies were doing the hard work it takes to compete in those elections. The recent battle inside the National Democratic Party over whether or not they would change their lead presidential candidate revealed something that we probably intuitively already knew to be true, that there are different forces inside that party competing for influence. And we bumped up against some of those forces in our work in these most recent primaries. In Missouri, we all poured our hearts and souls into defending Representative Cori Bush. Can we just take 1 second to breathe into how much love we shared through our volunteer hours? Some of y'all phone banked, some of y'all knocked doors, some of y'all made donations, you text banked, you sent postcards, you did so many things. You did political education work and all sorts of interventions to show love to Representative Cori Bush. And she stood up and she fought with everything she had for us. So I want you to just take a moment to love on each other and to send a special dose of love to Representative Cori Bush. WFP and our allies made tens of thousands of voter contacts on the doors and on the phones. And together we spent over $2.5 million to protect Cori Bush. But we were up against $12 million of spending from the other side, including AIPAC and the cryptocurrency lobby. What did this race have in common with the effort to defend Jamal Bowman? Well, first of all, between the two of them, these were the two most expensive races for Congress ever. And second, in both cases, our opponents went after progressive and vocal Black members of Congress. These are people that have been leaders in calling for a ceasefire, but also for a much wider justice agenda that many of us have been fighting for decades. So let's not sugarcoat it. Losing these two leaders in Congress really stings. But we're going to fight on, just like our champions will. In Arizona, WFP endorsed Raquel Taran over a year ago. Raquel was a leader in the Arizona State Legislature, and before that, she was a community organizer who helped lead the fight against SB 1070. Y'all remember SB 1070? It was the Show Me Your Papers bill and an unjust law that allowed for racial profiling, especially against our immigrant fam. And in that race, we also battled billionaire super PAC money and money coming in from shady cryptocurrency bros. Right now, that race is really close to call, but our candidate was only down by 42 votes the last time we checked, and there's a recount underway right now. So these are the battle lines, and they are all over the country, and many of the places where you are, where you live and love. They exist inside the Democratic Party and outside of the Democratic Party. As strategists, we can never lose sight of this. Now, there's also genuine excitement for the historic prospect of Vice President Kamala Harris becoming president. I want you to holler in the chat if you're one of the many that has been really excited now that she is becoming the presumptive nominee. On top of the huge rallies and the unbelievable fundraising numbers, there's been an explosion of record-breaking Zoom calls where people are coming together around Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign. The Black Women 4 call, the White Dudes 4 call, the Black Church PAC call. Some of y'all were there. We have obviously been talking about block and build on these calls since even before President Biden stepped down. And in the midst of all of this tumult, it is maybe important to reground in a few fundamentals. Whether we are excited or apprehensive about the new moment that we're in, whether we're feeling joy or whether we're wondering whether Vice President Harris will actually even make good on the signals she's sending about turning a page in Gaza. Many of the basics of this election actually haven't changed at all. So let's break that down. When it was Joe Biden, we were making clear in our block and build sessions that elections are not all about the candidates. And guess what? Even now, the same thing remains to be true. This election is not all about the candidate. It's about us and what we're building. Again, the fight inside the Democratic Party over whether Biden would step down revealed that there are more forces inside the party, many forces inside that party. They have different interests. Some of them are more disciplined than others, and some are more clear on the nature of the fight against authoritarianism and white Christian nationalism than others. We have this two-party system, and those two parties write the rules to keep it that way. But there's a big loophole, so to speak. The election system that we have in the United States allow any person, any one of us, to wake up tomorrow and decide that we're going to run for office as either a Democrat or a Republican. They don't have to be a member of that party or even agree with its platform, really. Let's remember, it was this loophole that created the opening that both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump used to run for president in 2016, even though both of them have a background in independent and or third-party politics. In many other countries, parties organize their party list of candidates. To be a candidate, you have to be on the list created by the leadership of the party. By comparison, party structures in the United States are open marketplaces, to use a like super neoliberal way of looking at it. And any individual can theoretically launch their political career if and when they want to. It happens to have, if they have money, if they have connections, it helps. But in theory, any one person can be a disruptor, as the tech bros like to call it. The point is that the political system we have in this country revolves around individuals and individualism. For the average person, this encourages a dynamic where people assign minor and sometimes major celebrity status to our candidates. Of course, based on our experiences, as our work as organizers and strategists, as activists, as people of goodwill over the years, many of us are instinctively distrustful of candidates, and rightfully so. Many of us may have held varying degrees of ideological commitment to the idea of building outside the system. So it can be hard to make that leap from both into elections and to do so in a way that is in direct dialogue with the candidates. This is the essence of the hard thing that we're trying to do right now. We're trying to crack the code of the two-party system, and we're fighting against the tendency in the United States to treat candidates as somehow exceptional, as somehow different or above us, or more important than our movement. To do this, we have to hold two somewhat contradictory thoughts in our head at the same time. First, candidates are us. Candidates are not, at worst, people we ignore, or at best, people that we hold accountable. That's just not strategic. They serve as the most visible avatars of who our movement is to the mass of voters out there in the world who only tune into politics on very occasional basis. They are our partners in governing, and they occupy a particular vantage point that allows our movement to spot and to seize opportunities to build governing power. I'm trying to win governing power. Second, no candidate is bigger than us. No candidate should be seen as bigger than the movement infrastructure that we're trying to hold, that we're trying to build. There will be times when we get to lift up candidates that are truly inspiring. We've done that on these calls. There are going to be other times when we have to have the discipline to support candidates that are anything but while pushing them to be better. We view our work in terms of the long-term arc of change, not just one or two election cycles at a time. We will support candidates, inspiring or not, because we agree that there are power-building interests for our people that are greater than any one candidate, no matter how big their celebrity may be. So, if you're feeling hyped that Vice President Kamala Harris is the candidate, this is not to bring you down. The momentum her campaign has created is real and not some short-lived sugar high that the more cynical pundits among us are claiming. And if you are doubtful or nervous about whether Vice President Kamala Harris will really represent a sea change from the current Democratic administration, this is not to tell you to get in line. We have to acknowledge and hold the contradictions of dealing with imperfect individuals seeking to hold power in a vastly imperfect system. On this mass call, we're trying to become the strategists, the organizers, the activists, the tacticians, the fundraisers, the door knockers, the phone bankers, the truth tellers, the party builders, and every other meaningful role that our movement needs for this election and beyond it, for now and for the years to come. Because as we're going to talk about later, our goal is not to just win an election or two and go home thinking that everything is now fixed, right? We can't settle. Our goal is to govern this country. Our goal is to have a government that is not just helping working class people out every once in a while, but a government that is run by working class people of all races, where we have the cultural and structural power. Somebody say power in the chat if you're with me. Before we transition, let's take a deep breath and remember why we're here. At the Working Families Party, we're building our own party across our differences and at the intersection of our collective strengths and unity. We're going to achieve the goal of governing, and we are doing it in the shell of the electoral system we have, with a vision for what it should be, what it can be, what it will be. So let's buckle up. Things are going to continue to be interesting and tumultuous potentially over the next few weeks. But together, I feel confident that we are ready for it. So if you're down with all of that, what you just heard, there are things that you can do to plug into the work. Y'all know what it is because many of y'all have been on the mass calls before. If this is your first mass call, welcome to the family. The first thing that you can do, if you haven't already, is text the words mass call, 2 words, MASS, space, CALL, to 30403. By texting mass call to 30403, we'll be able to plug you into ongoing opportunities to build with us. We still have work to do, y'all. And here are some of the examples of the things that we are asking people to do right now. You can take the Block and Build pledge to defeat MAGA this fall. You can sign up with WFP and Seed the Vote. Shout out to our homies with Seed the Vote to deploy and to canvass in battleground states that we have to win to save democracy. You can join Working Families Power to send personalized selfie postcards to remind your friends and family to vote this November. And you can phone bank with us tomorrow, literally tomorrow, from 12 p.m. Pacific time to 3 p.m. Eastern time to demand an offensive arms embargo in Gaza. So that's just 4 things right there. We're going to drop links to all of those actions in the chat right now. You can text mass call to 30403 so that you can get ongoing updates and so you can spread the word to others about what we're doing here. We've got one other potential project in the hopper that I want to test to see if you're interested in. I'm going to do that a little bit later. It's about the DNC. So for now, let's just say, let me ask you this question and y'all can respond to me in the chat. Tell me if you're planning on watching any of the DNC. And tell me if you're gonna do it, if you'd be more interested in doing it with one another. Like if we had a watch party, would you show up? We'll come back to this a little later. So we're gonna, again, text mass call to 30403. If you've already done it, get your friends to do it. Text mass call to 30403 and put in the chat if you were gonna watch the DNC and if you'd prefer to do it together. All right, I see folks. I see yes to the party. All right. I see y'all. We'll come back to this. We'll circle back. But we got some new people here tonight. So let's remind us, like, what are we doing here? These mass calls are being hosted by the Working Families Party and are highlighting WFP member organizations and leaders from across the country. As always, we want these calls to be grounding, to provide you with information and strategic orientation from movement leaders that you can trust, that I literally trust with my whole life, and give you concrete things that you can do to get off the noisy hamster wheel of information and misinformation that's getting thrown at us and get us back to power building action. So assuming that we don't need any more emergency calls between now and then, I want to remind you about our regularly scheduled program. On September 18th, we're going to prepare for the final sprint of the general election. On October 16th, we're going to keep fighting our way through and be ready for any October surprises. On November 7th, we're going to gather immediately after the election and prepare for whatever is next. Okay, so those are our next 3 calls, hoping and praying that there aren't any other needs for emergency calls between now and then. And here's what we're going to do on today's call. First, as always, we're going to do some political education on our block and build strategy. Then we're going to have a panel of movement leaders who I'm sure are the reason that you are on the call tonight. We're going to hear from Uncommitted, and we're going to hear about the effort to call for a ceasefire in Gaza and to call for a stop to military aid to Israel. They are advancing a sophisticated inside-outside strategy in connection to the Democratic National Convention, and we want to hear directly from our comrades who are leading this work tonight. So show them some love in the chat. And always, as always, we're going to give you concrete ways that you can plug into this work and take action like we just did with our most recent calls to action, those 4 things that I just shared with you. Because we don't learn how to be strategists to just have a better analysis than the other guys. We learn how to be strategists to put into practice that new knowledge and to build power. That's the goal here. So now we're gonna launch a poll really quickly, just because we want to track and be accountable to volunteer goals. So I'm gonna ask our incredible tech team to launch the poll. You all should be able to see it on your screen. If you can't see it on your screen, it's all good. I'm gonna read it out and you can respond in the chat, okay? So the first question is, what are your volunteer goals in 2024? How do you want to build with us this year? So you can give us a short, like 300 character answer to that. What are your volunteer goals in 2024? And how do you want to build with us this year? The second question is a multiple choice question. And it's asking which volunteer activities interest you. And there are options. You can pick more than one: door knocking, phone banking, relational work with friends and family, recruiting activists to volunteer events, welcoming new volunteers to our digital activist spaces, helping to facilitate training calls and discussions, or sending a WFP selfie postcard with the Reach app. So if one of the things that you also are committed to isn't in there, feel free to include that in your answer to the first question about what your volunteer goals are in 2024. So for example, if you're like, I'm going to fundraise, I'm going to donate, I'm going to do that kind of work, feel free to put that in your first answer. All right, we've got a few folks participating. I'm going to give it just a little bit more time, see if we can get the rest of you to fill it out. Again, the questions are, what are your volunteer goals in 2024? How do you want to build with us this year? Tell me how you're going to be an active party member. And if you're not yet an active party member, a dues paying member of the Working Families Party, we want you to join tonight. And then which volunteer activities interest you? Are you interested in door knocking or phone banking? Are you interested in relational work with your friends and family? Are you recruiting activists to volunteer? Are you welcoming new volunteers to our digital activist spaces? Are you helping to facilitate trainings and calls and discussions? Or are you sending WFP selfie postcards to remind your friends and family, your neighbors, to participate in voting in November? We're going to give you 30 more seconds to come on and get in here. About the time it takes for me to sing the Jeopardy song in my head. How are you going to show up and show out for saving democracy through the block and build strategy in 2024 between now and November? All right, last call. What are you going to do? What are your volunteer goals? What are you planning to do to show up for your people, for your community? All right, y'all. And we will close the poll. We're going to take this information. We're going to make sure that we can plug you into the meaningful work of the Working Families Party and our partner organizations, our sister organizations, our member organizations, because now's the time to be about the work, not just be talking about the work, comrades. All right. So let's get into our teaching. Let's get started with some political education. We have some new people on this call, so let's do a bit of a recap of the ground that we've covered in the earlier Block and Build political education sessions. I'm glad to say that the calls are recorded, and so you're absolutely going to be able to access them. Go back and watch the longer versions. I'm just going to give you the cliff notes of what we've done so far. In earlier calls, we've talked about the current political crisis in the United States. This crisis is defined by the fact that the Republican Party has been completely taken over by white supremacist, Christian nationalists, and authoritarian faction, right? We call it MAGA. This crisis is defined by the fact that much of the Democratic Party has been captured by corporate forces, and they are catering to the interests of affluent voters. This crisis is defined by the fact that working class voters increasingly across race and region are bleeding out of the Democratic Party. And mixed in with this, the two-party system limits our room to maneuver. We think of all of this as interconnected phenomena. We also have talked about who the MAGA movement is. It is a distillation of many different reactionary movements that have come before it. It is also, and this is really important, even more dangerous than its predecessors because it's emerging in the context of a more fundamental breakdown in the system where people's trust in our public institutions is at an extreme low point. So given the threat that is represented by the MAGA movement, we've been very, very clear that we're in a united front moment. We are part of the broad Cheney to Chomsky set of forces in the United States that needs to come together across our differences to defeat Donald Trump. None of us in this united front are big enough to defeat MAGA on our own. We're just not yet. So we need them and they need us. And we've taken inspiration from the French elections where they faced their own version of the MAGA movement and they built a broad coalition between the political left and center to defeat the far right in France. We also talked about how we can build in the general election because we can build in the general election, not just block. We can build working class power by reaching out to and organizing the working class voter coalition that we need right now. We talked about how politics is a vehicle to help us construct new majorities of voters. This is what the MAGA movement has been doing so successfully, and it's this that makes them really, really difficult to stop. We discussed how longer term we need to build our own block of voters. It needs to be made up of working class people of all races. We looked at a year-long polling and research project that the Working Families Party has been leading to understand exactly what we mean when we say working class, because amazingly, no one in the multi-million dollar polling industry has ever actually looked into this. So what we found was that members of the working class are under pressure from different directions. These so-called cross-pressured voters hear different things that make them either lean towards us or away from our politics. And we talked about how we can build toward changing the rules of the electoral game. We can fight for electoral reform that breaks the two-party cartel and enforces the current system of limited choices and limited ambition that we have now. For example, we can create voting systems that already exist in some states called fusion voting that allows third parties like the Working Families Party to compete meaningfully in elections without acting as a spoiler party. Fusion voting lets us build power with our people and our party and our ballot line right there in public. And success can breed success. When you start to win and people start to see you winning, it builds new momentum behind what we're doing. And I sure do like to win. We also talked about the need to be careful and not block without building or build without blocking. How many of y'all have seen the fake fights all over Twitter and all over Instagram and Facebook about whether or not we should be blocking or building right now? Well, we believe we've got to do both. We should not think of our job right now as just blocking so we can build later, because that hands power back to the Democratic Party. But we can build and not lose sight that we actually have to win in order to block the MAGA movement. Okay, so that's the recap of the ground that we've covered in our past political education sessions on the last few calls. You can catch those details in the recordings. But now I want to dig deeper into the idea of what exactly we're trying to build here, because we owe it to ourselves and the people that we want to join us in this work to be both precise and clear. When we show we have a real plan for what we're building and how we'll build it, we inspire confidence and a sense of hope that we can actually change the world as it is today into the world that it should be tomorrow. And as always, our movement ancestors walk with us in this work, y'all. This is our beloved Fannie Lou Hamer, one of Mississippi's finest. She and others founded the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party at a time when the Democratic Party was still a segregated institution. They were locked out of the Democratic Party, so they formed their own. They made history. So starting off, this is the broadest sense of what we're doing, what we're building. We are creating a new center of gravity on the political map to exercise governing power for, by, and of working class people of all races. Let's break that down a little bit. Let's start with governing power. Here's a simple definition. Governing power in this context is about controlling the government. But don't be confused. As simple as that definition might seem, it's not a simple concept. Here's why. We have all seen that just getting our people elected doesn't mean that they'll actually be able to govern. Just getting our people in the seat doesn't mean that they will have the power to move our agenda. There are so many forces that affect our ability to actually move a governing agenda, y'all. Our long-term job is to both get our people elected and to change the conditions that surround them when they govern. We've talked about this in past calls, but let's just take a look at how matters of war and peace are decided in the United States as an example. There are incredibly powerful forces that influence United States foreign policy. We've moved the dial on trying to stop arms shipments to Israel, for example, but the pressure on any US president to maintain this status quo is intense. It's going to continue to be intense. So our work is both focused on the immediate task at hand of winning elections, but it means we also have a strategic orientation and an informed timeline to build the kind of power that we need. We have to have short, medium, and long-term strategies. And governing power isn't just about a place we'll arrive at someday, right? It's a process of getting our people elected, doing the work to support them, growing our electorate, and then doing that all over again. Let's talk about building our electorate right now. Most people think of politics as having two teams, the blue team and the red team. But within the context of this two-party system, we've seen that voters move around. Historically, voters have aligned and realigned on the political map. They have switched from one team to another. Unfortunately, the voter coalition that the Democrats are currently relying on to win is not enough, and it's been eroding over decades. The Republican Party is right now trying to flip the script by branding themselves as the party of the working class. We call BS. And we have to be brutally honest with ourselves about the fact that they're doing this more and more and more. It's working. Our long-term strategy needs to be to build a new center of gravity on the map that can attract those working class voters in our direction. Even while we're getting busy winning with the voter coalition we currently have, our longer term build is to organize the voter coalition that we actually need. Our effort may start out small in the context of how many humans it takes to win elections in a particular geography. But as we organize and as we win elections with our elected champions, we will start to act as a force of attraction that brings working class people into our politics. They're looking for us. And our North Star is to build a working families party coalition that knits together working class people that are currently split between the party coalitions of the Democratic and the Republican parties. Again, these kinds of shifts in where voters line up on this map have happened in history, and it's happening right now. The question we have to ask ourselves is, on whose terms is this going to happen? Is it going to happen on the terms that the MAGA movement is trying to set, or is it going to happen on our terms? When I say whose terms, y'all type in the chat, our terms. Whose terms? Our terms, working class people's terms. So the rest of this session is about what we're building together. We need to have real precision and clarity about what we're building right now, and for the long term to make this strategy real. Let's put that last picture under a microscope. We're going to zoom in on that inner circle. I hope you see yourselves reflected in this picture. You may be an organizer that's working at the local level to organize poor and working class people in their homes and in their communities. You may be a union member, shout out to your unions, and you might be an activist. You may be active in a working families party chapter. Together, we're coming across our differences and building the connective tissue between all of these elements to create an integrated and coordinated division of labor. What do I mean by that? It's the idea that each of us has a meaningful role to play on our own and a critical role to play together. And as we do this work, our ability to reach and grow the base of working class people that we need to build a new governing majority increases. Let's dig deeper into that. It's a long-term work, and we break that work into three broad categories: the organizing we're doing, the infrastructure we're building, and the work we're doing to shape the narrative and fight the battle of big ideas. Together, we're organizing by building power at the state level. We're building shared movement infrastructure. At the WFP, this looks like the party leadership bodies that we're building in each state and at the national level. It also looks like the way various organizations are aligning our forces and developing shared political strategy inside the party. And finally, we're doing the work to tell a new story. We're using the electoral moment to change the common sense and shift the public's perception of what is politically possible, right? We're making our movement irresistible. This funny looking horse that you can see on your screen now, this funny looking horse is here because it helps us make sense of the process that's going on here. Right now, we're all focused on the election that's like immediately in front of us. That picture is pretty clear. But as we project out into the future, the plan gets a bit more fuzzy, and that's okay. The point is that it would be a mistake to only focus on what's directly in front of us. without holding our head at least in our head a little bit about how we're going to do what is now connected to what we hope to be doing in the next several years as we keep working on our next breakthroughs toward governing power. And here's what I mean by that. We're focused on the period between now and the election, as we should be. We're also thinking about what happens between Election Day and the inauguration, given that it was at this time that our opponents launched a failed coup attempt 4 years ago. We probably are also thinking about what happens in the first 100 days of whatever administration we're dealing with, right? Folks are talking about demands of the Harris administration. Folks are studying and talking about the impact that Project 2025 would have on our communities in the first 100 days, right? So regardless of whichever administration gets there, this 100-day period is a decisive time in any administration. But we also need to be holding a longer view about how the things that we do now are setting us up for the 2026 midterms and even further out towards 2028. We're going to end this section on build by remembering this quote from an incredible colleague and comrade, Paulo Freire, the Brazilian popular educator and movement leader. He was forced out of his country by a military coup, so he knew a thing or two about organizing in the context of rising authoritarianism. He took the long view of the work and the role that everyday working people must play to be protagonists in their own history. In our next political education session, we're going to dig more into what we are building for. We want to govern. Don't you want to govern? Don't you want to set agendas? Right? We want to govern in a way that is rooted in accountability. We want to govern in a way that is rooted in our commitment to liberation for all people and this planet. That is our North Star. And there's more to learn about that. So stay tuned. Make sure you come to the next call. Now, I'm going to move us to, I think part of the reason that we all got here tonight is that there are some trusted leaders on the ground that are building work every day to try to make sure that our commitment to none of us are free until all of us are free actually becomes our lived reality. I'm excited to bring up to the stage my brother, the National Director of the Working Families Party, Maurice Mitchell. Y'all might have heard from him once or twice on these calls. Then I also have the real privilege and honor to introduce to some and to bring up for others our comrades Abbas and Layla from the Uncommitted movement. Can y'all show some love to my comrades? I see y'all dropping hearts. I see you dropping hearts. Love, love, love to you, Mo, and to Abbas and Layla. I'm going to give y'all a second to introduce yourselves, but we're going to do it in the context of answering a few questions. So let's get into it. Abbas and Layla, again, I want to thank you so much for just like as family for all that you're doing and not regarding it robbery in the middle of all you're doing to join us here tonight. To thank you for who you are and for all that means. We see you, the incredible humans that you are. We love you. We're grateful for you. I want you to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about what Uncommitted is, just in case folks haven't heard about the work that y'all are doing. And I want you to share in the context of like what we're talking about in terms of the strategy to block and build, like what does Uncommitted have to do with that strategy? How is Uncommitted also blocking MAGA and building the kind of working class families party power that we need? So Abbas and Layla, I'll toss it to y'all.
I'm happy to go first. I was waiting for my sister Layla to
go. I thought you were going to go first, Abbas.
All right. After you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me on. I am so honored to be on this call with you, Ashley, with you, Maurice, and of course with my brother, Abbas, and just being in this space. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Layla Labid. I'm a Muslim American, but I'm also a first generation Palestinian American. I'm also a organizer, organizing, in grassroots communities, building electoral power within the Arab American and Muslim American community, specifically in Dearborn, Michigan, which is the epicenter of Arab America. And I was taught the core principles of the Democratic Party by my Baba, my Yaba, my dad, who was an immigrant from Palestine that had worked on the assembly line of Ford Motor Company. And he found his political home through the United Auto Workers. And so, in turn, with the Democratic Party. And he instilled all of those values in all of his children, all 14 of us. And the first time I did any kind of electoral organizing was when I was 12 years old, door knocking alongside my sister, Rashida, before she was a congresswoman, and registering Arab Americans to vote. And this was an initiative in response to 9/11 and the Iraq War, because of all of the racist, Islamophobic, anti-Arab, discriminatory policies that were coming out of the Bush administration. And so I've been doing electoral power building ever since, building the political power within my community and organizing around issues that impact us, like clean water, reliable utility, affordable housing, as well as combating anti-Arab hate and Islamophobia. But of course, after October 2023, it really became impossible to focus on anything else other than the horrific images across our screens of the human impact of our US policy decisions. Me and my community here in Michigan, we felt hopeless and helpless more than ever. And we still feel hopeless and helpless as we're seeing the headlines every single day of more and more Palestinians, men, women, and children dying from US made bombs and with our tax dollars. So when the Listen to Michigan, before Uncommitted became a national movement, we had Listen to Michigan, Vote Uncommitted. And that came out of this frustration, this grief, this betrayal that we were feeling out of this administration, the Democratic Party. And so we were able to pull out a strategy to send a message to the Democratic Party, to Biden, that his race to the White House, this was before his exit, couldn't succeed without the support of our community. Folks who know firsthand the impact of American-funded bombs and the anti-war coalition that we were able to build that wasn't just contained to Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. It was and continues to be multi-generational, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multiracial. And it represents the majority of Democrats. It represents the majority of Democrats and the need for a policy shift that ends the killing and occupation of Palestinians. And so that has offered us some hope, but we still have so much work to do because we're still presented with almost an impossible choice, because we are still watching the bombs fall on our homeland and on our brothers and sisters. And we're still watching a blank check being sent so Netanyahu can continue to be emboldened to drop thousands of bombs on men, women, and children, while our communities here at home are still struggling to thrive. You know, I like I said, I was doing community organizing and political power building, you know, along with Palestinian liberation work. And the fact that we send this blank check, this unchecked, unconditional weapons funding to Israel, while much of our communities are suffering. I'm from Dearborn, but I grew up in Detroit. And right now we've had over 200 schools closed in the last 15 years in the city of Detroit. Flint still doesn't have clean water. Highland Park of Michigan can't afford to keep their street lights on. Inkster, which is just, you know, around the corner from Dearborn, doesn't have a school system anymore. And so when I think about that, and I think about what is happening, how the intersections of our movements, the intersection of bad policy, how that intersects what's happening now with Palestinians and what is happening here at home. I know that we are fighting a fight for all of us. At the same time, we know that we need to combat fascism and authoritarianism. So Uncommitted has offered a moment to combat voter apathy among the Democratic base. And we're able to mobilize first-time voters, unlikely voters, and send that warning sign that we are in trouble in November while so many of the Democratic base do not support funding Israel's far right-wing government. We have to, if we are serious about combating authoritarianism and fascism here at home, we need to combat it abroad. And right now, Israel has the most right-wing government they have ever had. And so we need to combat that as they carry out a genocidal campaign against Palestinians. Like I said, while so many of us here at home are just struggling to keep the lights on, provide quality education to our children, and afford to live in dignity. In this moment, more than ever, we need to unite our party, the party whose stated core values do not align in this moment with the policy that is funding a war criminal and a fascist government. And I urge that we continue pushing the Democratic Party, pushing our candidates, pushing those in the race to the White House, and listen to the majority of us that are demanding the end of the killing and occupation against Palestinians. As a party, as a movement, we can have that fighting chance in November to defeat authoritarianism, racists that are on our ballot, but also abroad, and continue to say not another bomb. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Abbas to also offer some more words and details of our movement.
Thank you so much, Layla. Thank you to a couple of my organizing heroes. Well, Layla is an organizing hero of mine, but Maurice Mitchell and Ashley Henderson, thank you for leading. Thank you for showing us the way, all that you've done, all that you do every day. I'm also logged into the Zoom chat. I saw the Instagram live, the Twitter live, the YouTube. If you're in the Zoom chat and you got love for Ashley and Maurice especially, thank you all for your leadership. Really, really appreciate you. My name is Abbas Alawiyi. I am proud to co-lead this Uncommitted movement with Layla Al-Abid. And we, in my opinion, need to be extremely clear about what power we do have in this moment and what power we don't have in this moment and what power we're trying to build. And that's what Working Families Party is working on. That's what we're working on together. And the really difficult reality, and I say this, this is part of my introduction, I say this, as someone who has family living under the bombs in Lebanon right now. They're not going through what our siblings in Gaza is going through, but they're living under the bombs daily. I say this as someone who's worked in democratic politics. I worked for some of our favorite progressives like Congresswoman Cori Bush and Rashida Tlaib and Andy Levin. So I was in the Capitol. I know where we got to keep pushing, but I also know how dangerous Donald Trump is. I was in the Capitol on January 6th. We know what his right-wing fascism, what his white supremacist agenda would mean in terms of harming the people we love. And I'm also someone who is trying to take an honest assessment of the moment and sitting with the very difficult reality that right now, we actually don't yet have enough political power and influence to stop an actual mass killing campaign of children, using US bombs. And so we're coming together, organizing around a very simple idea. Hey, that's our family out there. And we think the policy shouldn't be that you get to continue sending bombs to kill civilians who happen to be our family members. We think that's a very reasonable ask. That's why we're organizing together with WFP and M4BL and so many of the folks represented here on this call around this specific campaign called Not Another Bomb. You can go to notanotherbomb.com and check out how you can plug into some actions, check out how you can sign the petition, and I'll actually hop into the Zoom chat in a moment and just drop the links there. This is our moment to organize because the DNC specifically represents an important moment for us to do something critical. Donald Trump is trying to take back the White House for his white supremacist agenda. Our siblings in Gaza are continuing to be killed using US taxpayer funds and bombs. Kamala Harris presents an important opportunity for us to get an updated Gaza policy that is different than the last 10 months. The last 10 months have been disastrous for our people, disastrous. And so this is an opportunity. So what we're pushing for right now is understanding that Kamala Harris won't adopt the policy that me and you and so many of us around the country that believe that we shouldn't be funding endless wars, that needs to stop. We need to grow our anti-war organizing. But again, we do not yet have the power to stop an actual genocide. And so we have to figure out what move can we make in this moment to grow, to continue growing that power, to continue growing the power of our movement. And by our assessment, on the uncommitted side, I'm an uncommitted delegate. I'm headed to the DNC next week. We're going to have people on the inside. We've got folks actually all around the country, over 60 events and actions, local actions being planned. And you can plug in at notanotherbomb.com. We're keeping up the pressure to say, stop sending weapons to kill civilians, stop sending weapons to kill people we love. We're sending that message very clear, and we're presenting Vice President Harris with an opportunity. The specific uncommitted strategies, we're saying, hey, Vice President Harris, if you commit to stop sending weapons to kill civilians, to kill people we love, we're ready. We'll mobilize uncommitted voters specifically for your election. We think that's a very reasonable opportunity. We think that's a very reasonable ask, and we're hopeful, and her campaign has been engaging with us. We're hopeful that she will move on this and that we can move her on this. Because what must happen is, whether folks have endorsed Kamala or haven't endorsed Kamala, wherever you sit in that, as we work to block Trump in November, we can't take our eyes away from our siblings in Gaza. We have a responsibility to them. I was a 15-year-old child when I survived those bombs myself in South Lebanon. I have a responsibility to the 15-year-old in me and every 15-year-old and younger and all of their elders and friends, every one of them. We have a responsibility to them to keep saying Free Palestine. If you believe in a Free Palestine, I want to see it in the chat. I'm here on Zoom. I want you to say Free Palestine. I want you to say Not Another Bomb. We've got to keep up our organizing. This is our moment to grow our organizing power, and I'm honored to be in it with all of you.
We can do better than that. My brother said, I want to hear Not Another Bomb. I want to see Free Palestine in the chat. I want to just bring up a couple of things that I heard in summation before we toss it to our party leader. I want you to hear that we're the majority, actually. We're the majority, actually. The majority of humans in the United States actually believe in stopping these bombs, y'all. The quickest way to a ceasefire is what? An arms embargo. Quit sending the damn bombs. It's not rocket science. It's finger painting. Stop sending the bombs, right? That's how you get a ceasefire overnight, right? What I also heard is that, like, we're actually giving bombs not just to some random do-gooder, but to a fascist authoritarian, right? And just in the way that we're trying to block the right here, we're also trying to block the right globally. And then I think two things that are super critical that I want to make sure you heard. One is that just because we don't have the power to stop it easily without a lot of labor, a lot of multi-tactical interventions, a lot of struggle, right? It doesn't mean we can't build that power. And that's exactly why we're here tonight, trying to learn from each other and hear what's going on so that we can actually engage in meaningful work that builds our power to get what we want. And we know we can do that because we've already seen that we've shifted the narrative of what the Democrats can do and not do in relationship to what's happening in Gaza right now, right? That this uncommitted movement, all of our comrades with the Dulles Justice Project and USCPR and all the Palestinian liberation organizations, the anti-war organizations, the racial justice organizations, the political organizations that have come together across our differences to say enough is enough, is making some headway. It's why we've got folks like Abbas gonna be at the DNC on the inside, y'all. We doing something. take the win. The last thing that I want to say, just to make sure that you heard it, because I've seen all the jibber jabber online about like Gaza, the stuff around Gaza and the election being a single issue. But did y'all hear Layla just run down all the issues that directly impact our communities that we could actually be solving with the stupid amount of money that we're sending to support the Israeli military forces? Did y'all peep that? Did you hear water, housing, right? I know my Movement for Black Lives fam is here. We've been talking about divesting from these systems that harm us and investing into our healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities. You just heard Layla break it down. It's not a single issue, right? And even, especially for those that are Black liberationists, you also have to know that there are Black people in Gaza, right? In fact, Pan-Africanists say that Palestine is the star at the top of our continent, right? So you just heard from two of the most brilliant, grounded, principled leaders that I know about how this is not only not a single issue, but why it really matters that we continue to come together across our differences, not be in fake ass fights, and build the kind of power that we need so that this not only doesn't happen anymore in Gaza, but doesn't happen to anybody else ever again, right? Not another bomb. So if you're down, I want you to say not another bomb. I want you to say free Palestine like you believe it, like we're manifesting the win right now. And I want you to take a second to send some real intentional love right now to Layla and Abbas. I want you to send some love. I want you to be like, if you reach your hands out to the screen, right? And send some love to our comrades, all of the folks that are going to be on the inside of the DNC, all of the folks that are going to be dealing with the Chicago Police Department, who is no joke, on the outside as they put pressure on the outside of the DNC. So for all the activists, the organizers, the people of goodwill who are going to be pushing the Democratic Party in Chicago to do right by us, by working families, I want you to just send some love their way. All right. Now back to the regularly scheduled program. Maurice Mitchell, my guy. Love you. Good to see you. Make sense to us. Like we are trying to build a culture of being principled, grounded power builders. And many of us are members of the Working Families Party. We hear a whole bunch of noise online about what's going on with the DNC, if we should pay attention to it or not. Is it relevant to us? We know Kamala's going to speak. We know maybe some of our folks from Movement are going to be on the stage. What are you expecting, and what would you tell us to be paying attention to? What are things that we maybe shouldn't be doing? Lead us, leader.
Absolutely. I would be remiss if I didn't use this platform to elevate Abbas and Layla and the movements and people that they represent, the hundreds of thousands of people that voted uncommitted over this election cycle, and the millions more of all races, of many different ethnic backgrounds, of many, many different religious backgrounds, who have come to the majoritarian position that we need to stop the bombing. We need to do everything in our power in order to preserve human life. We need an immediate and permanent ceasefire, and we need an embargo on offensive weapons to Israel, the far-right authoritarian Israeli government. And one of the things we need to do is challenge cynicism. And I think we could take a page from the past few months, the past year. In October, the Working Families Party came out for a ceasefire. At that time, it was highly controversial for any elected official to do so. In fact, only a dozen sitting congresspeople did so at that time. We're now at more than 100 sitting congresspeople, including the vice president calling for a ceasefire. Why do I bring that up? Cynicism tells us nothing can change. Cynicism tells us our organizing doesn't matter. Cynicism tells us our work doesn't matter, that we're just screaming into a void. This movement is what produced that sea change, where something was thought to be so politically unfeasible or problematic or challenging to the political class that people would not say a word. Here we are months afterwards, and that has become the standard. That has become the majority standard, right? Poll after poll after poll shows that majorities of Democrats agree, and majorities of people in general. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the millions of people around the world who also agree, right? So it's important, number one, for us to challenge the cynicism that says we can't do anything, that organizing doesn't matter, that everything is rigged, that everything is set, right? If that's true, there's no reason to do anything. There's no reason to organize. There's no reason to vote. There's no reason to knock on doors. There's no reason to build a movement for Black lives or a working families party, right? So the cynicism is a project of the far right. The cynicism is the project of the Donald Trumps and the Netanyahus of the world, who want to tell you that you're best to sit on your hands because other people, strong men got it from here, right? And we need to challenge that, right? So that's number one. Number two, we need to reject this idea that we're pundits. What do I mean? When you watch news and you watch those pundits, what are they paid to do? They're paid to basically opine on air, right? They're paid to respond in real time to current events. They're not paid to in any way change things. They're paid simply to opine. So we get in this habit of mocking them. And what do? We opine to one another. Online, maybe in a few characters on Elon Musk's platform or on another platform. We're opining here and there, but we're not getting in the fight, right? We're learning, right, from the punditry that our job is to just be pundits and to wonder and to muse. What do the American people think? We are the American people. Well, where's the economy? Our opinion on the economy is what the economy is doing, right? And so we have to challenge that. The other thing is we have to challenge this idea that they also attempt to lull us into, and it's good for their marketing strategy, it's good for their business strategy, right? To be spectators, right? So we put on a jersey, right? And there's other people who will put on another jersey. And then we sit in the arena of political sport and we look down at the arena at the political activity and we're spectators and we cheer our team and then we boo the other team, right? And then lastly, that we're just consumers. We're on our couches and we're scrolling on Instagram, we're scrolling on TikTok, we're going through and we're cycling through the 24-hour news, and we're simply consumers, but we're not in the fight. We need to challenge all of those things, the cynicism, the consumerism, the spectator nature of politics, and the punditry, and think and be like organizers. We have to think and be like organizers next week during the DNC, between now and Election Day, and over the next 3 years, or over the next 4 years, over the next decade, as we fill in that horse that you showed us, right? So that's number one. It's a mindset thing, right? How are we actually thinking about what our role is? We have to remember that the things that we do and say matter. If the things that we do and say don't matter, then there's no reason to volunteer. There's no reason to get involved. And there's every reason to simply wait and allow political actors to decide our political destiny. We're not going to do that. And I'm assuming if you're listening, you understand why we can't do that. Because this is a time where we must do multiple things at once. It's another thing. Resist anyone that's telling you that there is an obvious and pure test of your values by engaging in one and only one tactic, right? Be highly skeptical of anybody who tells you that. This is one of the reasons why we introduced the concept of block and build that you shared, Ashley, right? There'll be people who say, all you should be doing is blocking. All you should be doing is just getting on the Kamala Harris train, and entrance to that train is your silence, right? And if you do anything other than that, then you could be potentially leading us to fascism, right? We reject that. We reject that outright. And then there's people who say, we have to build. All you need to be doing is thinking about the long term and doing the long-term work. And all we need to be doing is challenging the status quo, right? And therefore, the particular tactics of challenging the status quo are the only things. And if you're doing anything else, including uniting with Democrats against fascism, that you have somehow are at odds with the long-term interest of building independent political power. We reject that as well. We believe that the energy, that the dynamism, that the power is in the both. And we are engaging a multi-headed hydra. We're engaging an enemy that's on multiple fronts. And our ability to be nimble and nuanced and do multiple things at once is our best strength against a much less creative and less nimble opponent, right? So we are up against a global right-wing authoritarian movement that has taken root across the globe. You mentioned it before. The French left managed to beat it back in recent elections by leading a broad united front. We're clear. MAGA is the American expression of that global fascist wave. So when we're fighting MAGA, we're fighting the American expression of global fascism. It's our turn, right? The French left did it. The UK Labour Party was successful. It's our turn to step up and lead a united front here at home against MAGA. Now, that same right-wing authoritarian movement has taken root in Israel as well. You heard it from Abbas and you heard it from Layla, right? So that right-wing movement is MAGA here. It is Netanyahu's government in Israel that is today, right now, bombing schools, hospitals, and apartment buildings with arms provided by the US government. This is how things are linked. And just as we're fighting to defeat fascists here, we must stand in solidarity with the movement for Palestinian rights who are fighting for an arms embargo and a permanent ceasefire. These fights are inextricably linked. And I would add that the billions of dollars that we're giving to Netanyahu and the ultra far right and the racist right in Israel, imagine what those resources could look like in places like North Philly, right? Where we're working with Kendra Brooks every single day in order to invest in affordable housing and quality schools, right? This is how these things are linked. This is how our fights are linked in practical ways. And electorally, our fights are linked in practical ways. We believe that the biggest electoral united front is one that embraces Palestinian rights, is one that embraces Black rights, is one that embraces LGBTQ rights, is one that embraces the largest, biggest tent and sees us all. And I could tell you what I'm going to do, just to be clear, because you asked, what should people be doing? What should people not be doing? All I could do is tell you what I'm going to be doing, right? Because we're developing organizers and strategists and critical thinkers. We're creating a map and a framework. I'm going to, for the next less than 90 days, in order to defeat Donald Trump and JD Vance, and I say that with my full chest, right? I'm clear about the conditions and I'm clear about the assignment. That is our duty. I'm going to be talking to voters every single place I could talk to, especially in swing states. In swing states, we're knocking on 5 million doors. I'll be crisscrossing the country doing that. I'm going to go to Milwaukee, to Philadelphia, to Atlanta, to Phoenix. And I'm talking to everyday folks. I'm talking to people like my cousin. I'm talking to people like my auntie who have real questions, right? And I'm going to talk to them about how electing VP Harris and Governor Walz can concretely and materially improve their lives and be such a contrast between Project 2025 MAGA and Donald Trump. And I'm going to do that with my full chest, with no apologies. And I'm going to continue to pressure the administration and our current candidates to bring the ethnic cleansing and slaughter in Gaza to an end. And I will do that with my full chest and with no apologies, standing side by side with Abbas and Layla and anybody else in the struggle in order to end this slaughter. And so I'm urging you to join me, join all of us and take on the work of both blocking and building. Trust me, we can do both, right? I grew up in a working class family where we did a lot of things all at once because we had to, which is why you should be very skeptical when anybody tells you that you cannot do multiple things, multiple hard things, multiple things that have tensions in them. That is the nature of living in this country. That is the nature of living under this system, is doing multiple things and dealing with those tensions. So take the pledge, canvass for us in battleground states, send postcards to your friends and family about why it's crucial they vote. Trust me, those postcards to your friends and family really matter. Give your time and labor to beating MAGA through the Working Families Party and our various coalitions in the states that we're operating. And then once you do that, so sign up and then phone bank with us tomorrow for an arms embargo so we can bring this terrible war to an end and ensure everyone living in Israel and Palestine can live in peace, security, and freedom. You can do both. You can do multiple things, right? Our life in this context of these situations that we did not create. We didn't create the two-party system. We didn't create the electoral college. And so we shouldn't be quarreling with each other because of the limitations of these systems. We should be practicing with each other how we scale and how we're nimble and how we figure out solutions in order to get over these limitations, which means blocking and building, which means tomorrow on that phone bank in order to end the arms embargo, and every single day between now and election day, talking to folks in swing states, getting out there and explaining the intense contrast between Tim Walz, Kamala Harris, J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump, as well as their MAGA agenda and the agenda that we get to make on the other side of the election if we defeat them. Let's meet this moment together and leave it all on the battlefield.
Man, my party leader said, we've been doing hard things. We're going to keep doing hard things. And we're going to do it together with our full chest. I saw my comrade in the chat say, I'm 10 toes down. If you 10 toes down, I want you to send some emojis up, send some reactions, say your amens in the chat. I want you to make your commitment known that you are down. You are joining WFP. You are joining Uncommitted movement to make sure that we get the work done to block and build, not just because we're mushing tactics together or being ideologically fuzzy. We're doing it because we know that to get to where we've got to go, the power we need to build requires us to be nuanced, specific, and clear. That we have to build a multi-tactical, multi-sectoral, multi-racial movement for multi-racial working class-led democracy. We're doing it right here, live and in living color. You all are critical to that. So you heard the calls to action, but I'm just going to sum it up real quick, and then I'm going to close us out. Before I do that, can we just one more time show some love to Mo, to Layla, to Abbas? Can we just give it up for them one more time? Send them so much love as they continue to navigate this terrain. Pray for their safety, lift up their leadership. I want you to go online. I want you to follow them on all the social medias. They are there. They are guiding us and directing us there. I want you to go and make sure that you follow the Uncommitted movement, like all over social media. And I want to make sure that you hear the calls to action. Abbas, I might ask you to drop those links one more time. I'm going to talk about it a little later just to remind you, but you get an opportunity right now to sign up for WFP and Seed the Vote deployments and canvassing in battleground states. We're going to drop these links in the chat as well. You can join Working Families Power to send personalized selfie postcards to remind your friends and your family members to vote this November. We'll drop a link to the sign up for that. I want you to do it tonight. I want you to sign up to Phone Bank tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern, to demand an offensive arms embargo in Gaza. I want you to sign up for that phone bank right now. We're going to drop the link in the chat. And I want you to share with your friends the multitude of opportunities that we've got to engage right now, to talk to regular working folks about how we can be building multiracial democracy together. We're going to drop a link for how you stay informed about the updates as that work continues to blossom and bloom. The best way, I saw someone in the chat ask, like, how do I stay in touch? How do I get these links? How do I get the recording? How do I sign up for these things? The easiest way to do that is to text mass call to 30403. If you do that, our team is going to text you with updates. We're going to remind you about the mass calls so you don't miss them. We're going to send you the link so you can sign up. We're going to give you up-to-date, in like live and in real living color opportunities to plug in, to make meaning of what's happening so we understand what we need to do, to be reminded of what it is that we need to commit to, and be clear about if any of these things need to shift for us to build the kind of power that you just heard Mo, Layla, and Abbas talk about tonight. So I want you to text mass call, 2 words, MASS space CALL to 30403. I want you to send that out to everybody you know and get them to sign up too. It's going to take a mass movement to do this. It's why we called it mass call. We're not trying to play small in this moment. We're trying to be as big and as bad as we need to defeat MAGA once and for all and build the kind of working families power that we deserve, right? So if you're down to do that, if you're going to volunteer tonight, if you're going to share it out tonight, I want you to tell me you're going to do it in the chat. Say you're doing it. And if you've already signed up, I want you to say done. We're going to do it tonight. We're not going to put off what we need to do today tomorrow. All right. I see folks are doing it. Tara, I see you. Eric, I see you. Jessica, I see you. Folks are getting it done tonight. I love y'all. Thank you. There's so much power on this call tonight, y'all. I can feel it. I hope you can feel it. I hope it takes you into your tomorrow feeling some hope, some informed optimism about our ability to actually do this work, because we know what needs to be done and we have everything we need in our bones to do it. Besides all the information that you just heard about, there's going to be a digital concert on the 15th. There's going to be distributed actions taking place in Chicago on the 18th. There's going to be an in-person and remote mass action call with Not Another Bomb on the 21st. We're going to make sure that you get information about all of that. Remember, this election is about us, right? VP Harris and Walls, all these folks, they're important. I'm not trying to dismiss it, but I'm going to be throwing down for them to win, to defeat the MAGA threat, not because I'm in love with them, but because I believe in you and the communities that you come from. We are the strategists that our movement needs for this election and beyond it, now and for the years to come. We have set our sights on not just getting a seat at the table, y'all, but actually governing this country. And the work to achieve that purpose starts right now. It starts in your state. It starts in your local elections. It starts with building a bench of champions from our movement who are ready to run for office. It starts with doing the organizing and the building of movement infrastructure to get them elected and to support them as our partners once they're in government, to hold them accountable. It starts with standing up and speaking from our chest about the values that we believe should inform the decisions our government makes, until the power of that vision is so powerful. It's so convincing. It's so hopeful that working class people of all races can win and sustain the victories that we've been struggling for. We absolutely can and will live in healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities here and everywhere. All of us. This is the work that we do when we go out and we organize unions. This is the work that we do when we organize our neighborhoods and our communities for self-determination. It's the work that we do when we demand an end to war. It's the work that we do when we organize for housing justice and reproductive justice, for immigrant justice. It's the work that we do when we prioritize principled struggle with one another, from unity to unity. And we don't take the bait of fragmentation that is being pivoted to us by the right that only benefits our opposition. It's the work that our ancestors did and that we are called to do again. I am so proud to walk with all of you in this struggle. Remember, our next call is September 18th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, 5 p.m. Pacific. See you then. Until next time, good night, everyone.